It's on Wednesday from 9:30 right until 2:30, and I did share earlier this year about our CSA or cooperative. At this point, we're up to like 70 members in the CSA, and that's a very big deal for us. We're on to the next thing, looking at the Graphic Festival in November, so we'll keep you updated on that. And we're getting ready to replant for fall vegetables. So if you want to jump in, please let me know.
Thank you.
Hey, Max, you guys do something. There's some folks around the front of the building trying to get into the Magnet Center. They don't know it's back here, so we're going to send somebody around there. Just so everybody knows this is probably where the meeting's going to be at when we have the meeting here.
All right. Thank you. This presenter is with the Right to Housing Alliance. This is the first time that many of us was aware that this organization existed, but it's doing some very vital and important work. Jessica Lewis is a representative from this group, and she's here to elect us.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to pass them if you guys can pass them down each row. I work for a housing justice organization called Right to Housing Alliance. We're about 4.5 years old, and we've primarily been working to build power among Baltimore renters. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what Right to Housing Alliance is and what we do, and then talk about some of the context of what's happening in Baltimore for housing, and then talk specifically about Baltimore City and rent support, and what kind of barrier that is for renters to actually have safe and affordable housing. So Right to Housing Alliance has been holding weekly meetings for almost 4 years. 2 of those we were meeting at Lily's place at the Park and Community Hall Alliance, who's very generous to let us meet there every week for a very long time. And so we're a membership-based organization led by renters who are fighting for safe and affordable housing. About a little over half of the population of Baltimore rent our housing. Who in here rents their housing? Just a few. So over half the city rents housing. We have, it seems like housing in Baltimore is pretty affordable compared to other comparable. I need to talk louder?
Yeah, please.
So compared to other cities that are Baltimore size, it kind of seems like we have pretty affordable housing. But actually we have the second least affordable rental housing market in the country, according to the area median income. So more than half of renters in Baltimore are paying more than 30% of our income for rent. And we know that when we're spending a disproportionate amount of our income on rent, we're putting up other things like healthcare, and transportation, food, all these other basic needs that we can't afford. And we think that we shouldn't have to make those calls. We should have to decide between the basic things that we need. And that's kind of the premise of the work that we do. So every year there's an organization called the National Low Income Housing Coalition, and they put together this really devastating report called the Out of Reach Report, and it discusses in every metropolitan area what wage you need to make in order to afford a market rate apartment without paying 30% or more of your rent. And for Baltimore, that's over $24 an hour. And I don't know a lot of people that make that much money. But that means that like their report says, housing is out of reach for a lot of people. We have about 7,000 families that are evicted through Baltimore's rent court every year. That court processes 150,000 cases a year. It's the highest volume court of any court in the state of Maryland, and that's just for Baltimore City. You know, if you consider the population of Baltimore, that about half of the folks showing up in court have never been to rent court before. We know they're not repeat cases. That's just a devastating burden on folks who are trying to get high and live in cities like this. The safety part is another major concern about rental housing in Baltimore. Over 30% of the rental housing stock in the city is considered so substandard that it's uninhabitable. I another 30% on top of that has at least 2 or more interior code violations of some kind. So that leads me to Baltimore City's rent court, which is supposed to be the mechanism by which renters can get relief for these conditions issues in unsafe housing, for lead, for mold, for pests, for leaky plumbing, leaky ceilings. And the court is tasked with balancing our right to live in safe housing with the right of landlords to collect money from renters. And right now, the court is very, very efficient in doing one of those things, and very, very poor at doing the other. It functions as a very rapid sort of debt collection service for landlords. Again, it processes so many cases that there's a real desire for the court to be as efficient as possible. But what gets sacrificed there is justice for renters. We did a study with the Public Justice Center, who's our legal partner, over the past few years that showed some of the mechanisms by which renters get sort of pushed away from talking to a judge about conditions issues. And we found some stuff that we already kind of expected and some stuff that was really surprising. But basically there's this multi-point diversion process that happens in rent court. First is that a lot of renters don't get their summonses. And again, if the sheriff's department is delivering sometimes 700 to 1,000 summonses a day, we know that those are getting dropped somewhere along the way, that's just kind of an untenable situation. So first of all, a lot of renters aren't making it to court for their hearing. Second of all, when renters get there, the process is very confusing. A lot of people aren't aware that there are tenant protections in the state of Maryland and in the city of Baltimore that allow renters to raise condition issues in their properties as a defense for not paying their rent. The process of just showing up in the rent court is chaotic and overwhelming. There's no one directing you where to go. Has anybody been to rent court? I know that's kind of... Okay. Yeah, I've been a couple times in the last year. I'm a tenant organizer. I don't know why my landlord keeps trying to take me close. Yeah, it's confusing and it's chaotic and it's hard to navigate, and if you don't know what to do, it's really easy to get jammed up in the process. So the second sort of thing we found is that even renters, when we surveyed 300 renters to ask for their experiences and asked them a range of questions, and then compared those with the court judgments and transcripts of the hearings to make sure that they matched up. And what we found is that the first sort of step was that even renters who were highly motivated to show up for their cases ended up getting diverted before even getting to the courtroom by the landlords themselves or their representatives, who are landlord agent companies that don't have to be attorneys. It's actually an exception for landlords in Baltimore City that they can have a non-attorney represent them in their stead in rent court, but renters cannot. So these agents don't have any sort of ethical obligations to the court. They don't have any ethical obligations to the Bar Association or anything that they do in front of the court. So these hallway negotiations happen. And often this happens with landlords or agents who are in court a lot and have a sort of relationship and they know how to navigate the place. And they're usually talking to tenants who don't have an understanding of how to navigate the process. And what happens is they get sort of diverted away from getting in front of a judge by making these settlements that aren't always in their best interest. And then they're told by the landlord or the agent that they don't need to stick around for their trial. And then the agent or the landlord to do. They can just kind of say whatever they wanted, whatever happened, even if it's not like a good, solid, like legal or judicial outcome. So the second thing is, if they make it into the courtroom, judges make opening statements that tell renters that the only thing the court's concerned with is if they paid the rent or not. That it's not concerned with hearing about conditions issues. There's another court for that, take it down the hallway. In the state of Maryland, there actually is a legal right to defend a failure to pay rent case based on conditions issues. So that, that element is not getting told to renters. So they're discouraged from bringing up valid defenses that they have. We found in our study that over 75% of renters had a valid habitability defense. but they weren't allowed to bring those up because they felt discouraged. If they tried to bring it up, oftentimes the judges either directly told them they weren't going to hear testimony or told them to go file a separate case against the landlord. When by law they're allowed to bring up the conditions of the defense for non-payment. So there's this massive process sort of diverting renters away from being able to have these habitability concerns heard in front of a judge. And again, considering, like I mentioned before, the extremely poor quality of a lot of our housing stock in Baltimore, and particularly for folks with really low incomes, that's the only housing they can afford. And there should be a remedy in the court that allows them to live in safe housing. So some of the sort of the most